Well, it finally happened. Graham Linehan was arrested on the 2nd of September for public statements inciting physical and sexual violence against a protected group, more specifically, trans people. The professional sadass who has spent years tormenting the trans community finally got a taste of his own medicine, and it's left me wondering, could Joanne Kathleen Rowling face the same consequences for very similar actions carried out by her on the 1st of September? Let's discuss. But first, a quick content warning for the following: transmisia, intermisia, homomisia, misgendering, sexual violence, police violence, and genocide. If our work has helped you, please consider supporting us via Patreon so that we can keep the channel running. You can also help us by liking, commenting, and sharing our work on social media. I'd also just like to take this time to remind our viewers that the statements made throughout our videos are the opinions of myself, the host, based on the evidence I have available to me. They are not and should not be taken as unquestionable fact, which is why we reference everything, because we're fallible. Thus we try to give you, the viewer, the ability to check all evidence yourself in order to make up your own mind, which is what the reference numbers in the top left corner are for, being numbers that match up with the reference list found in the transcript linked down below. As such, we encourage all viewers to do their own research to reach an informed conclusion about the topic. This is especially important for this video, considering that I am not a lawyer, I am a sociologist, and are therefore coming at this not from a legal perspective, but one of criminology. As such, I do not know the intricacies of UK law and precedent, but I am qualified to speak on the impact such violence has on marginalised communities, both on a professional and a personal level. Just wanted to make that fact explicitly clear before we continue. Hi there, my name is Ethel Thurston, she, her, they, them, and we need to talk about Graham Linehan's recent arrest, as well as what this could potentially spell for infamous hate peddler Joanne Kathleen Rowling. But first, Linehan, who was arrested at Heathrow Airport on the 2nd of September, being the 50-year-old man talked about in a statement by the Metropolitan Police. And whilst they didn't confirm his identity at the time, they did confirm that he was taken to hospital after officers became concerned for his health. You know, the same officers who, up in Glasgow, brutalised multiple trans children and even denied one child multiple doses of their heart medication without seeking any medical support or advice. Those police. Yet, in spite of this preferential treatment, Linehan couldn't help but cry victim at the mere possibility of facing consequences for his own actions after he was later released on bail. Now, what actions would those be? Well, various posts he made to Twitter, including the now infamous one he made on the 30th of April this year, which asserted, quote, "If a trans-identified male is in a female-only space, he is committing a violent abusive act. Make a scene, call the cops, and if all else fails, punch him in the balls." End quote. So, blatant incitement to both physical and sexual violence against trans women and AMAB trans femme individuals, since those are who he's referring to when he uses the Nazi dog whistle, trans-identified male. To try and justify this, Linehan asserts, without ambiguity, that a trans woman merely existing in a woman's space, as has been their legally enshrined right in the UK since 2010, without a single incident, is a violent, abusive act. Do keep in mind that Linehan has been explicitly linked to the normalization of labeling any LGBT+ person, though particularly trans people, quote-unquote groomers, for simply defending themselves from him and his fascist gang. In fact, the London-based Institute for Strategic Dialogue noted that Nazis on 4chan very quickly adopted Linehan's 2019 strategy of replying to any trans person with the statement, "OK groomer," leading it to spread and go mainstream. So, when he claims that trans women are committing a violent, abusive act for using the public bathroom in line with their gender, that is the overall narrative he is feeding. One which declares all trans women to be violent, sexual predators. Hate speech under UK law can generally be defined as any statement or text which is intended or likely to promote violence against a person or persons belonging to or believed to belong to a protected group, in this instance, a member of the trans community. I firmly believe that labeling an entire marginalized community violent and abusive groomers is likely, if not intended, to do just that. Well, I guess I don't need to question the intended part here, considering he quite literally told people to punch her in the balls, but I'll keep it general for the case we're about to discuss in a minute. Of course, the entire reason Linehan is back in the country is for allegedly assaulting a 17-year-old trans girl out on the street after he realized she'd been recording him as he attempted to sexually degrade her. That's actually one of the best things to come out of all of this, with Linehan being banned from Twitter until his follow-up interview in October, meaning his reach and thus ability to further torment his alleged victim is vastly decreased. Not that everything's peachy, as pointed out by Helen over on Blue Sky. It's worth noting that the mainstream press, largely controlled by gender-critical fascists, have been running article after article about the incident, whilst having remained silent over the literal hundreds of thousands of people who turned up in support of the trans community over the anti-trans Supreme Court ruling earlier this year. It's also worth noting that said articles have largely smoothed out what Linehan did. We see euphemistic phrases such as posts about trans people or even just Twitter posts, none of which convey the fact that he explicitly called for violence against trans women. There is also the aforementioned difference in treatment between Linehan and the many trans children being tortured by the UK government, an effort he himself has publicly supported. Fun fact, Linehan actually threatened to sue us here on the channel for covering his support for the extermination of trans children, only to turn and run the moment we began fundraising to defend ourselves in court. He then began hanging around, getting his ass constantly handed to him, like the time he tried to label me an incel, only for me to remind him that, out of the two of us, only one of us gets to cuddle her wife every night. This was after he and his now ex-wife had split up over his anti-trans bigotry, yet prior to their divorce. He, never came back after that. But yeah, it would have been nice for Linehan to actually face consequences for his actions, rather than simply being arrested, barred from Twitter, and told to come back for a police interview in October. And I know this might sound strange coming from me, considering how anti-police I am, but considering that the trans and intersex communities are both facing an active genocide in the UK, I will take any violence, other than sexual violence or genocide, that makes gender-critical fascists scared. Just as murder is wrong yet killing Nazis isn't, there's a big difference between police violence targeting trans children for simply existing, and police violence against someone who promotes anti-trans genocide. I don't care what violence he suffers, as long as it gets him to stop. Speaking of support for anti-trans genocide, that brings us rather nicely to Joanne Kathleen Rowling, who has taken to Twitter about the incident, yelling, quote, "What the fuck has the UK become? This is totalitarianism, utterly deplorable," end quote. Which I think is the first time, at least in years, that Rowling has even acknowledged Linehan exists. And I find it funny that she still couldn't bring herself to say his name. This is something Linehan has cried about in the past, as seen in this clip from one of his live streams, begging her to support him whilst pretending like he'd forgotten what he was going to say, so as not to lit on to just how desperate he is.
There was one other thing I was going to say. What was it? Oh yeah, J.K. Rowling. Please share this this story. It would get across to so many more people. And I'm not sure if I've hurt your feelings or what, but you never tweet anything I do or say. I hope it's just a misunderstanding. But if you could see your way to tweeting Lynn's story, I'd be really thankful.
Of course, I don't think she's doing this because she actually gives two shits about Linehan. I think a part of her might actually be worried that she could face similar consequences for her actions, particularly given a statement she made on the 1st of September, namely, quote, "My husband just marched into the kitchen to tell me he thinks the 1st of September should mark open season on these cunts, and only people who know Neil can possibly grasp how funny that sounded. 3 rolling on the ground laughing emojis." End quote. The supposed cunts in this instance are, of course, trans people and those speaking out in defense of us during the UK's ongoing genocide, which Rowling has personally played a part in, as shown in our video, how J.K. Rowling turned Harry Potter into a symbol of hate. That's the group she's targeting here. As for her use of open season, this is a hunting term used to describe the annual period in which hunting a specific species is permitted, yet when it comes to marginalized folk, is often used as a euphemism to engage in verbal, physical and sexual violence, targeting said marginalized group. This isn't the first time Rowling has encouraged such behavior, as seen when she ordered her fans to photograph any woman they suspected of being trans using the women's bathroom, before uploading said photos to the internet, presumably to form a digital lynch mob intent on tracking down and destroying said woman for not being feminine enough, at least according to Rowling's entirely fascist and patriarchal views of women. There are more of such instances, including this tweet in which Rowling asserted that, quote, "If any harm befalls Halef as a result of the truth coming to light, responsibility will lie solely with those who lied about his sex so that he could carry on endangering young women and stripping them of their rightful honours in front of the world's media." End quote. Preemptively justifying any violence that is targeted at Imane Halef as a direct result of Rowling's racist and misogynist actions in asserting, without any evidence, that Imane was intersex, and thus a man, and therefore an intrinsic threat to real women. Then we have the time she asserted that, quote, "I'm not saying this world would be a better place if threatening, bullying, porn-addled perverts who lurk in women's bathrooms at children's theme parks found themselves confronted by men their own size. But at the same time, I'm not saying that." End quote. Framing trans women just trying to pee as child molesting predators. The whole refusal to state things bluntly, far from clearing her, in my mind demonstrates clearly that Rowling knows exactly what she's doing here, that she's cognizant of the fact that she's engaging in incitement to violence against a protected characteristic. She also loves to tell trans and trans-supportive people to jump off a roof, as seen here, in which she replied to someone with, quote, "My opinion on magic is the same as my opinion on women with dicks. Neither are real. However, if you want to prove me wrong, by all means, jump off a roof on a broomstick." End quote. She later repeated this sentiment in response to gay rights hero Peter Thatchell for acknowledging the fact that sex in the animal kingdom isn't simple, with Rowling responding by declaring that, quote, "When Peter survives jumping off the roof, flapping his arms, I'll believe human beings can change sex." End quote. Yet, for me, the most telling post, alongside what we're covering today and the bathroom tweet, came when she affirmed a fellow gender-critical fascist who had just declared trans people to be a, quote, "civilization-ending concept," end quote, with Rowling replying with a kiss, whilst calling said genocide-spouting bigot a quote-unquote heroine. Now, a question I've asked every time I brought this up is, if trans people are a civilization-ending concept, how then is one supposed to save civilization? And I think today's post confirms all my worst fears. The way to end trans people and thus save civilization is to have an open season on them, allowing gender-critical fascists to violently exterminate us and our allies. That has, in my opinion, always been Rowling's intent, making this, along with everything else, clear incitement in my mind, if not by some bullshit legal technicality, then certainly morally. Which just leaves the question, could Rowling be arrested and potentially even face trial for said hate speech? Well, it's certainly a possibility. Rowling herself seems worried about the incident, but that could simply be that she's more worried about her Prosecco stormtroopers being arrested rather than herself. I mean, unless the mold has given her the power of mitosis, how is she going to rally the 20 to 30 sadasses that make up your average anti-trans rally? Sadly, I don't think she will. She just has so much money along with the Tory leader in her pocket and the Labour leader chasing after her affection like, well, another sad transphobe we've already discussed in this video. At most I expect her to be visited by police, as in the UK, there is a two-tier legal system, one for regular people just trying to live their lives, and one for the billionaires literally destroying everything. That said, if you're a trans person or an ally living in the UK and would like to report any or all of the posts I shared in this video to the police, explaining how you think they're examples of clear incitement, I say have a crack at it. You can even make a direct comparison between them and Linehan's post to make a case for consistency in at least investigating. Of course, her estate is up in Scotland, so I suggest contacting them. Though again, do so on your own prerogative. I've tried police before, specifically regarding Linehan's history of sexual violence against trans minors, yet I've never had an acceptable response on that. I also feel like Linehan is being set up as a bit of a patsy here, kinda like a reverse myth of meritocracy. The myth of meritocracy refers to the capitalist lie that amassing wealth is merit-based rather than the result of inherited cross-generational wealth. Now, in order to prop up said lie, they used to allow a small number of working class people to gain wealth every now and then and join their ranks, so that they could then point to them and go, see, they made it, so can you. So don't tax the rich. Of course, more recently, they realized that they control the mainstream media and can thus just lie, inventing rags to riches stories for themselves, just like, oh, Rowling did, as was exposed by Kaelin Conrad earlier this year. Meanwhile, the UK is currently being called out for anti-trans and anti-intersex genocide. Both parties, once supportive of self-ID, are now struggling to outdo one another on just how many trans children they can murder, and in all, the UK's reputation has gone to real shit, especially after Rowling's little hate display during the 2024 Olympics. Which, let's be honest, was deserved before any of this happened, but is only now being recognised by people outside the trans community. Well, a way to distract from this and pretend people such as myself are all alarmist radical leftists is to sacrifice a single well-known anti-trans bigot with no money, no friends and no family, someone the head of this genocidal movement still refuses to name even as she touches on his arrest, in order to have a single case which they can point to and go, see? How can you say there's a trans genocide in the UK when people such as Linehan can be arrested for posting to Twitter? Who are the real oppressors? It can't be us, for sure. That's what I think is happening here, personally. And if the UK police don't act on Rowling and the previously discussed posts, that's all but confirmed in my mind. Hell, as I was wrapping this up, the Chief of the Metropolitan Police, Mark Rowley, openly called for the laws to be changed, stating that it wasn't their job to, quote, police toxic culture war, end quote. Statements also supported by both Labour leader Keir Starmer and his right-hand child murderer, Wes Streeting. Do keep in mind that the number of hate incidents specifically targeting trans people between 2012 and 2022 increased 13-fold. That is an increase of 1,282%. And it has only gotten worse in the years since, particularly with the Supreme Court ruling earlier this year, emboldening gender-critical fascists to target anyone they deem not feminine enough, including breast cancer survivors. This is a direct result of said incitement. This is what the Met Chief of Police is declaring, not his responsibility. Not that the police were protecting trans people to begin with, but now they're being open with the fact that trans people, we're on our own. That it is, to borrow the words of a certain hate wizard and her abusive shit of a husband, open season on trans and intersex people. But who knows? We can't see what's happening behind closed doors, and a girl can still hold on to some hope whilst preparing to fight. So just a very quickly put together video on the topic. It's likely that I've missed stuff, but hey, that's the great thing about being part of a community. Anything I miss, you lot tend to pick up on in the comments, which is always greatly appreciated. So, what do you think? What are your thoughts on Linehan's arrest? What do you think of Rowling's own comments? Do you think she'll face any consequences anytime soon and why? Did you notice something I missed? If so, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. And if you appreciate what we do here and want to help keep us running, please consider becoming one of the wonderful patrons who make our work possible. You can also make a one-time donation via PayPal or Super Thanks on YouTube. On that note, we'd just like to thank the following people: Matthew Kovac, Flynn, Bo Ayer, Deborah Goldsmith, Higgins the Seagull, Jackie Sins, Mix Alba, and Peter Cole. And for myself, Adita and Levi, take care now.